Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. Today we are here with Ian Cameron, the chairman for the Portfolio Committee on Police, and he's going to break down everything that's been happening in the Ad Hoc Committee, his personal views on the president's role, and what he would change about policing in South Africa. Ian Cameron, welcome to SMWX.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you here to talk about a very, very long, what's been 3-4 weeks now, of testimony happening in the Ad Hoc Committee. What is your take on everything that has come out so far?
So first of all, thank you. It feels like a never-ending drama.
Yeah.
It's been going on now for it's almost 2 months now that it's been running, and I think that a lot of things have come out, new information. The long and the short of it is that everything so far goes back as far as 2003, 2004. You know, there are so many things that happened in the South African Police Service that have built up this frustration and internal conflict that I think a lot of that is coming to fruition in a negative sense. So yeah, there's still a lot more coming. At the beginning, I was a bit skeptical about the Ad Hoc Committee and the commission, the Madlanga Commission, running parallel to each other. But I actually, think that it's a really good opportunity because both bring different angles to it. And the fact that, the evidence leaders speak to each other as well, I think that's really positive. And they're two different parts of let's call it investigative bodies that are supporting each other in this process.
You asked a very interesting question on I believe it was like the third day of cross-questioning to General Mkhwanazi himself. And you had asked, when he had appeared before the committee in March, why did he not, as your role as the chair and to the committee at large, bring his concerns about the disbandment of the PKTT? When he had the opportunity in front of the committee, why did he not bring it forward? And you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you were too pleased with his answer, but do you think if he had brought that information to light in March, we would be in a different position now? Do you think that he had faith in the committee and its oversight role within Parliament to act on the allegations?
Yes, look, it started way before March already. Yeah. Remember that the notice of the PKTT's closure, as soon as it was leaked, I already submitted the first questions on it in the beginning of January when we started inquiring about it. And that was to the Minister of Police. General Mkhwanazi then made certain remarks at National Police Day regarding internal squabbles in the South African Police Service, and that it reminded him of what he faced in 2011. I can't remember verbatim, but he said that if they needed to fight, they would fight it out, and etc. And it really made headlines. In between that, him and I had spoken a few times, and he actually asked me to invite him to the committee because he had certain issues that he would like to raise. The initial discussion was actually about the, call it misinformation, and even sometimes accurate information that was doing the rounds about senior figures of South African Police Service and how there were these smear campaigns running. So that was the initial focus of the discussion. That ended up happening on the 5th of March, and another meeting happened I think it was the 2nd of April.
Yeah.
On the 5th of March meeting, there were quite a few things that weren't mentioned. Eventually, the National Commissioner said it too during his testimony. I watched some of your interviews as well, and you stated that we had an opportunity to act. We didn't act. We didn't take it up. But one needs to understand the context within which this happened. General Mkhwanazi never mentioned anyone like Kat Motlala. He never mentioned the capture of the judiciary. He never mentioned capture of any form of court or criminal justice system. He never mentioned cartels, never mentioned the Big Five, so-called Big Five. The only name that he did mention was Brown Mkhotsi. Okay. And at that moment, the minister was also present. The minister denied that allegation in a very peaceful way. You'd remember the clip, right?
Yeah.
The minister was like, we're not acquaintances, associates,
Yeah.
The whole associate definition discussion that there was. So there was no reason, and no one challenged the minister on that. General Masemola himself, as the National Commissioner, as he conceded during his testimony at the Ad Hoc Committee, also didn't counter anything of it. not Masemola Mkhwanazi or General Khumalo, the Divisional Commissioner of Crime Intelligence, for any moment said that they were against the closing of the PKTT. In fact, when we asked the National Commissioner, he conceded that, and he said that they expected us to read between the lines. That's a very dangerous statement to make, especially with politicians. And I include myself for that. We need to be factual. We can't do oversight by reading between the lines. So I think he did have trust in it. I think if he had started speaking about cartels and judges and courts being captured, the seriousness of it would have been taken far more. Remember, there was an opportunity on the 2nd of April to continue the discussion, and again then, there was no objection to the closing of the PKTT, amongst other things. We had several committee meetings after that. There was no questioning of the closing of the PKTT. Nothing official was raised in the Police Portfolio Committee. And to this day, after the 5th of March, no one has reached out to me even, as the chair of the committee, to say that we are against the closing of the PKTT. Where I noted comments in the media as well with like, but why are you speaking about the portfolio committee? Well, it's quite simple. Yeah. If someone accuses me of not doing my job, I do take it personally, and I'm gonna defend it if I did actually do my job. If you go look at the amount of inquiries that we launched regarding whether it was the PKTT, communication regarding smear campaigns, the promotion of certain members, even appointment of certain members, then we have done a significant amount. We've unfortunately now come to a point after a year where we will, and we can talk about that later, but we'll actually have to start possibly reconsidering whether we sign off on a budget or not, because of significantly controversial figures that remain in the police.
A big thing, and I agree, I think to a large extent there is a blame being placed on the Portfolio Committee on police, and having followed it very closely, one of the big issues I see is when we're talking about intelligence and we're talking about security clearance. That is my big thing, because to have someone come and account before Portfolio Committee, it's a very different set of circumstances than an ad hoc committee. And even something that General Mkhwanazi had said in his testimony, and why he hadn't really openly said things in ad hoc, was like, he just doesn't believe that this can be said in the public, it needs to be said in camera. And it was the National Intelligence Coalition Committee's 2024 report, I believe, where they spoke about the uneven levels of security clearance over intelligence agencies. And so regular members of parliament, and even you as the committee chairman of police, you don't have security clearance. Do you think that impedes your oversight role? Because, I mean, I think it's one provincial commissioner only has security clearance now. Like, when we look at the uneven levels of security clearance and how it's given, there isn't a steadfast rule. And to me, from what has come out in the ad hoc committee testimony now, how do you then execute your oversight role when you yourself don't have security clearance?
So there are two elements on it. I agree with you completely. I think it would be very, very helpful. It would actually make my job easier as well, because there are certain things that we would like to discuss in the committee that, I must be honest, I'm not so sure whether we can discuss certain things. You know, very often the minister, for example, even the deputy minister said, you know, we need to have a closed meeting so that they can fill us in, because otherwise criminals are watching, etc. And then I'm like, but what? How do they know they can trust me? Never mind the other members, they don't. There is no way. So on that side, absolutely. The other part is the role of the Joint Intelligence Committee. Yeah. And I want to refer back to the 5th of March meeting. Many times, and I'm not going to get into the political discussion of it, there were members that kept on bringing up things that are meant to be discussed in the Joint Intelligence Committee. Things that we're not allowed to discuss, where I would be seriously overstepping in my mandate. Frustratingly so, because I would love to actually discuss those things, especially because crime intelligence plays a significant role in South African Police Service. So it's very difficult because both do overlap. Ideally, I think it should potentially be a legislative or regulatory change that for a police committee, a defense committee, anything regarding the security cluster, there must be some kind of a level of security clearance. Whether it's top secret, not so sure. There are different levels.
Yeah.
In terms of the police, very worrisome. I mean, one example that I always use is the fact that General Mboto he's from the Hawks.
Yeah.
Last year, controversial promotion that he received. Like, he's got friends that, in my opinion, he shouldn't be friends with in that kind of position. And he fulfills a very, very senior role in the DPCI, and we question that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that security clearance process is then so clean. Did he really get it? Does he have it? And if so, how on earth did he get it with the background and the controversies that he has been involved with?
I think you raise some fair questions, and I think that it's something that will be even addressed by the Ad Hoc Committee later down the line. I want to come back to that July press conference. What do you make of, and I hear what you're saying, that General Mkhwanazi, you know what, he had the opportunity, he wasn't as truthful as he was during Ad Hoc when he came before the police committee. But do you think the framing of that press conference, necessary isn't the right word I want to use, but I mean, to have people dressed up in military regalia, and rightfully so, General Mkhwanazi is in uniform, there are different levels of the uniform, but I think that it almost attached a certain fear going into the Ad Hoc Committee proceedings and the Commission proceedings. And from a security perspective, I would love to know what you think about having people in balaclavas at this national press conference. No one really knew what was going to happen. Do you think that, and I understand the framing of General Mkhwanazi to say, you know what, he wanted to get everyone's attention because this is a serious issue, but I think I could also make the argument that had he come forward with these allegations in an open portfolio committee meeting, it would have almost had the same effect. I think that from maybe the media wouldn't have taken it as seriously because they didn't have that imaging, but I think from an institutional perspective, I think the Ad Hoc Committee would have been here regardless.
Yeah, so the two sides to it. So I'm going to speak to the uniform side first, and then the framing, the image that it created. It's actually interesting, you know, a lot of people were questioning, say for example, the portfolio committee, even the Ad Hoc Committee. The media also didn't pick up on anything on the 5th of March, which is important. Now, first of all, it was very clear in the July press conference that there was significant frustration. And no one can argue that. I think he has a point in terms of the frustration. And people may have wanted to approach it differently. In terms of the uniforms, the balaclavas, that's normal for special task force. The identities aren't paraded around. Once you've earned the uniform, General Mkhwanazi himself, you can wear that uniform.
Yeah.
So within a regulatory framework, it's fine. I think I phoned him after that press conference. So I had gone to church in the morning, and I was having cake with my two little girls, and next moment I get these screenshots. I'm like, oh. And I call him after the press conference. I'm like, General, thank you for changing my Sunday afternoon significantly. And he laughed and he said, sir, he always says, sir, we have to do what we have to do. So laughed, and I said, well, I'm guessing I'll see you soon. And it was a storm from there, and it hasn't ended yet. But I think the imagery or the picture that it created was a little bit of an African coup type of feeling. That's what a lot of people wrote on. And that's where I feel it might have overstepped in terms of the imagery, especially with regards to the past of policing in South Africa and the type of policing we had in a previous regime. It's a very, very slippery slope, and it's something in a democratic space that we have to be conscious of. You know, we're very focused on having community-orientated policing, democratic police service. You know, there should be no form of oppression, etc. And I think a wrong perception could have been created. I don't think that was his intention, though. What he did make clear, though, is his intention was, and he said this at the Ad Hoc Committee, that he wanted to make it very clear that if they need to fight, they would fight. And that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, I must be honest, because it creates the impression like there is one or more groups that are opposing each other, and that there could potentially be a physical conflict. Could he have framed it differently? I think so. I don't think he needed to say anything differently. I can't fault that. That's up to him. He says he has evidence for it, and things are coming out in the Madlanga Commission and the Ad Hoc Committee. Were the uniforms necessary? I'm not so sure. In my opinion, when a provincial commissioner, especially General Mkhwanazi himself, who is someone that has become he's become a bit of a, he's got an elevated status in terms of provincial commissioners in the country. It must frustrate some of the other provincial commissioners significantly. If he called a press conference in normal uniform and he spoke, I think the media would still have shown up. So there was a definite show of force on the day, and it was a clear indication that they would prepare, that he would take a fight to whoever the opponent is.
I think that's fair. I'm of the view, I think a coup will never happen in South Africa. I just don't think that, at least from a policing and a military perspective, I just don't think that we have the manpower. I mean, look, when you look at illegal firearm trade in South Africa, it's definitely a big cause for concern, but I just think from a statistical perspective, it's unlikely. But what do you want to come, and what is your hope for the Ad Hoc Committee and its proceedings? We're going to go at least until late December, if not January. I think a lot of people want to see the kind of restructuring of SAPS as a whole, and I think there's a large-scale call for the disbandment of a national policing structure and having kind of a national oversight body, but then consolidating the police force provincially. You spoke about the democratization of policing. I think I would argue that very little has changed about the structure of the police force from 1994 into the democratic era. I think that certain aspects of the policing has changed, but when you look at what we had in the apartheid era, where it was a police force, it was there to defend the apartheid government and almost carry out the due diligence of the apartheid government and enforce what was happening legislatively on the ground. Whereas I think now the government has almost attempted to make this transition into a service and to have policing for the people, but I don't think that has translated to SAPS as a whole now.
Yeah, you should come and present to the portfolio committee. No, you're 100% right. It hasn't translated the way that it was meant to. I think there are amazing structures in place. We had the discussion in the portfolio committee this week about how the police civilian secretariat has developed in a way that 30 years ago there was nothing of that kind, and that's positive. That's a body that can actually do real proper oversight. I don't think they're being used on the level that they should, and unfortunately in terms of oversight, it becomes very, very frustrating that you can make recommendations but you're often ignored. Example, General Fani, who is the Divisional Commissioner of Supply Chain, implicated in investigation by the SIU from PPE, corruption, fraud from the COVID era. At that stage, he was a senior person working for Treasury. Today, he's the Divisional Commissioner of Supply Chain Management. This SIU report is damning for the South African Police Service, it's damning for Treasury, and it's damning for him. Nothing has happened. And we keep bringing it up. We mention these things. It's the same with Generals Teo, Moodley, you name it. There's an entire list. A lot of the names that you would hear in the Ad Hoc Committee are the names that almost weekly come up in the Portfolio Committee and other committees. The point is just that I don't think that those civilian oversight structures always have the power to really hold them to account. That's why I'm saying earlier that we actually need to get to a point where we influence budget, where we literally become, we get to a point where we say, well, it's checkmate now. We can't sign off if we know that the individual that needs to manage this budget is implicated in anything corrupt. And that's where we are headed. But you're 100% right that it hasn't translated the way that it should. Also remember, when Jacob Zuma was president, there were significant changes to make the police more let's say democratic and democracy aligned, And he brought back a lot of the ranks, the military ranks. There's a lot of confusion because you've got commissioners and at the same time they're generals. And then you've got, even in the Ad Hoc Committee, members that confuse when do you call someone a lieutenant general, general or major general, etc., etc. So it's very confusing. And if it becomes confusing at this level, at the end of the day, it must be very confusing when you need frontline services.
Ready to take your podcast to the next level? At Ayeye Studios, you can film, edit, and release your podcast all in one place. From crisp visuals to clean sound, we've got you covered, and we can even distribute your podcast on YouTube and other platforms. The best part? It's brought to you by the same team that brings you SMWX quality. Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Welcome to Ayeye Studios.
You speak about the budget, and look, I'm definitely of the view that I think policing, we need more money going towards policing, but look, we need more money going everywhere in our current fiscal strain. I think it's the second or the third largest item of the budget is VIP protection. I'm not a VIP protection denier. Like, I think when you look at the state of criminality in South Africa, specifically against people who work in politics, we look at the alarming amount of rates of councillors being killed at a local level. We look at, I mean, you yourself was attacked during oversight. We see that there is a threat on politicians' lives. But, I mean, when we look at something like a deputy ministry, and there's an argument to be made for deputy ministers to be in office, but that's a different conversation for another day. But how do we then restructure that budget allocation? Because it's important. I don't disagree that I think that on a certain level protection is needed. But on many occasions, I've bumped into a minister, a deputy minister on the weekends. They don't have their VIP protection with them. So where do we draw the line at this is mandated and this is extra? Because the deputy minister of police, sure, VIP protection is needed. You're dealing with sensitive information. I could make the same argument for finance, minister in the presidency. But like sports, arts and culture, like women, youth and persons with disabilities, I think that there is definitely a burden cost, and you could make the argument that something like 3 billion rand in the context of the 3 trillion rand fiscus, like where do we balance the books there? But I think that there are bigger issues within policing that needs to be addressed where that money could go to.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be measured, and this is a big frustration, it shouldn't be measured according to your level. Obviously, a president and a deputy president, that's a whole different discussion. But when it comes to senior political appointments, any political appointment for that matter, it should be determined according to threat and risk assessments. Those TRAs are either done depending on where the threat potentially comes from. So generally, like the TRAs that were done on me were done by the police and not by SSA. Many others are done by SSA. They are depending on where the potential threat comes from or the risk comes from, it would determine who does that TRA. That TRA is not set in stone for the rest of time. So if they say, Ian, there's a legitimate threat at the moment, these are the things that we've picked up. By the way, they don't actually tell you what they pick up. They just say there's a threat, which is super frustrating. But they need to determine what is the level of protection that you need. And after X amount of time, they go and reevaluate and they determine whether that protection is still adequate, whether it's still needed at all, and then they can adjust accordingly. So I think that's the important part, that threat and risk assessment should determine that. And then already you'd see that there'd be a significant drop. Because I think to a lot of people, it's become a luxury item. It's become a matter of convenience. It's more about having a driver than actually getting to your destination alive. And that's the thing. You can imagine the risk of a police minister, Department of Home Affairs even. There were several of them. Any local government matter, depending on the province, especially if it's a MEC related position. Finance, as you correctly said. So all of these have different risk factors that need to be taken into consideration. So if we go look at fruitless and wasteful expenditure, material irregularities, the Auditor General presented to us recently, and the police's irregular expenditure increased by 140% in a year.
Yep.
They've got 2.5 billion rands worth of irregular expenditure from previous years that they still haven't collected a cent of.
Yeah.
Not even speaking about the 650 mil in the last year. So just with that, can you imagine if we could use that money to make sure that detectives have vehicles, or that we've got DNA kits, or that we've got rape kits, or whatever the case may be. So I'm not convinced that they always need more money. They need to be more efficient with the money that they have. They probably slaughter me for saying that, but the point is just that we can't just keep throwing money at the problem, and then there are all these holes in the boat, and we keep missing what we put in.
I think that's a fair point. Look, TRAs aren't always followed. I mean, it's the former, so the IF inquiry is happening the same time as Ad Hoc, and the ex-CEO had TRA done. It was found that there was no risk on his life, and they still had allocated him security, and it's like you act up a budget, I think, of like 60 million, if I'm not mistaken, up until now. And so I think it's issues like that where like that is fruitless and wasteful expenditure.
Absolutely.
And so I do think that more can be done in the policing service with budgetary allocations, because we don't have money to waste. I do think, and this is kind of a broader question I have politically, and I want your personal opinion before you say you're not a part of the national leadership of the DA. But I think I want to know from your perspective, do you think, and look, the president being named by multiple witnesses on its own is not cause or grounds enough rather for a motion of no confidence. The Constitution is very clear. I think it's like 1 or 2, and it says unfit to hold office, allegations of misconduct, not doing your job effectively, and not upholding the rule of law and the Constitution. So like those are the grounds of a motion of no confidence. But I look at Cyril Ramaphosa's tenure, I look at everything coming out in the Ad Hoc Committee, and I think that there is an argument to be made for one, if not more, of those grounds to be met for a motion of no confidence to come forward. I look at the DA in the past, like through the 5th administration, through the 6th administration, as the legislative opposition in Parliament. The DA was holding the ANC accountable. And I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the MK party, but they are miles behind where the DA was in terms of, from a technocratic legislative perspective in Parliament. And I beg the question now, who is holding the ANC accountable? And I get it. From a political perspective and a governance perspective, the DA is placed in a very difficult position, because you are now saying we're in government, we don't want to be out of government. What you are communicating to your voters is that you do not want what you campaigned on, this doomsday coalition with the getting rid of Cyril, the RET faction in the ANC rising, going to coalition with MK and the EFF. You don't want to be kicked out of government, you want to stay in government. And again, I get why that appeals to your voters, but I think from an analytical perspective and where I'm sitting, I get it from a political perspective, but what is a means to an end? Because I really look at this question, a motion of no confidence is the only way that South Africans, other than an election, can hold the president accountable through their elected representatives voting. And so if you don't have that mechanism now, with the DA saying, you know what, we're in this GNU, we're trying to collaborate with the ANC, we're trying to hold the ANC accountable on a governing level, to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I just don't think that it's working. And it really does beg the question, I think in the Zuma era, we had like 5 DA motions of no confidence coming against President Zuma. And do you think that this is grounds for a motion of no confidence against President Cyril Ramaphosa? Because I think that there are grounds to be met here.
So, regardless of the motion of no confidence, he needs to come and explain.
Yeah.
So I think that's
very fair, yeah.
point number 1. We need to have like a solid interrogation. And you know, from my point of view, let me give you 2 examples. During the Ad Hoc Committee, I had 2 specific questioning sessions. Was General Masemola and General Sibiya, both on different sides, allegedly different sides of the coin. I couldn't approach Masemola differently to what I approached Sibiya.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily like that, because I get along well with Masemola. I get along well with him. But I had to ask uncomfortable questions the same way that I had to ask to Sibiya. So from my point of view, that should be the way that the DA approaches it. It's not a matter of being selective when we ask the questions there. I have to be consistent in my approach. I can't go soft on someone just because I think politically they may be better aligned or not. So I think two things. I think the first is with regards to the president, he needs to come and answer. And whether it's Ad Hoc Committee and the Madlanga Commission, he needs to come and answer. And from there, it would give a very, very, very good indication. It's actually three things. It's that. The second one is elections, yes, but I think budget and budget reviews are a significant step that we can do. An example, at the moment with the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, CIRA, massive corruption issue. They've now been referred to the SIU by the Auditor General. It's a huge step forward, and that is because of adequate oversight. And that is also the reason why we won't be allowing them to come and now present an annual report, because they haven't changed anything. Yeah. It's all still the same people implicated in all the same corruption. Might not stop a budget immediately, and it might be small versus SAPS, but then it's one entity that we can say we've put you in the corner. In terms of ANC politics, that would be very frowned upon. I know it was previously when we questioned regulation changes in CIRA, but from my personal point of view, regardless of the party, I'm not there to make friends. So you are going to have to make difficult decisions and have uncomfortable discussions. There are at least 3 police generals that I can think of that have vacated their positions because of those difficult discussions that were all politically connected. And then the third thing is that is getting to the budget point. So, but those 2 things I think is the first step that I would say. I must also be honest that I'm not an expert on motions of no confidence. Okay. So I don't know all the technical details around it. So off by heart, I can't give you a technical answer on it. My focus is literally 99% police. But it is becoming increasingly frustrating that it feels like the presidency is here on one level and everyone else is busy with something, and then either the president and the deputy president as well, they come in to speak about something, and then they always seem like they didn't know about anything. Now, I have it on good authority that even before the commission was announced, the National Commission as well as General Mkhwanazi did speak to the president. So it's not like he didn't know. And it's the same now when we had former Minister Cyril, great friend of mine, and when we had former Minister Cyril there, we had suspended Minister Mchunu there. The way that they speak as though they didn't know about anything, it absolutely astounds me.
Do you think from a policing perspective that the presidency is effectively doing their job? Do you think that they're fulfilling the constitutional mandate, upholding the rule of law?
No, I think they're not. I think the presidency is failing in that regard. Deputy President's a very good example. Paul Mashatile is a law unto his own. If you look at Presidential Protection Services, they are not held accountable by the same National Commissioner that has to hold the rest of the police accountable. General Wally Roeder, who's the commander of PPS, Presidential Protection Services, also seems to be a law unto his own. We all understand the controversies that have happened there. Hopefully we'll get to a point where we can interrogate that. What makes it very difficult is that when you say things against them, like for example with Paul Mashatile's protectors, I called them thugs, and within a day I had ethics complaints at Parliament lodged against me. But they are thugs. They are exactly that. They are criminal thugs, and they shouldn't be in the police. So I know that's in terms of a policing context, but I don't think that they're fulfilling their duties. And I also don't think they're doing it with urgency. The fact that, and this isn't criticism towards Acting Minister Kachalia, but the fact that the presidency can invite the Acting Minister of Police to visit Vietnam with him in a time when the police is in the crisis that it's in, tells me that they are removed from what reality on the ground is. Can you imagine, use the Cape Flats as an example, my constituency is in Mitchell's Plain. Just the amount of people that were shot this week, I mean, it feels like we almost weekly go and deliver flowers to people who have been affected by some sort of violence. If you just consider that, and then you say, but hang on guys, you hang in there while everyone's shooting at you, we're just going to go to Vietnam quickly. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have relationships elsewhere, but for goodness sake, we are in crisis.
I think that's fair. The grounds for a motion of no confidence is the president not fulfilling their role effectively and upholding the rule of law and constitution. But that's a decision for the national leadership of the DA. And look, you're right. I think going to Vietnam was definitely a choice. Cyril Ramaphosa leaving the country after the July 6th press conference, again, also a choice to say, you know what, I'll deal with this issue when I get back into the country. And I do think that it really at large speaks to the president's urgency to deal with situations. I often talk about like Cyril Ramaphosa's favorite reaction is to be shocked. He's shocked, he's surprised, he's stunned. I would love to know if he had to come and account before the committee, what would you ask the president? Because I'm sure you have a lot of questions. What would you like answers for?
So I mean, obviously we'll get to the questions regarding Brown Mokgotsi and Kat Motlala, etc.
Yeah.
But I would actually go to due diligence questions first. Like, how did he choose Minister Mchunu? Why did he choose him? Why did he choose Bekele at that stage? What was the reason for it? What influenced it? You almost want to put him on a polygraph. He must be like on a lie detector test to show me whether he's speaking BS or not. The point is just that I want to understand what influences that decision. Because when you listen to the testimonies by Mkhwanazi, General Mkhwanazi and General Masemola, it was very clear that they receive political instructions, and they receive it quite often. So Richards Bay Minerals is an example. That instruction came from the presidency. Who do they think they are?
Yeah.
Why do they matter more than the average citizen in the country? So yeah, I would head in that direction first. Why does the presidency have their own police service? Because that's what it's become. They can pussyfoot around it as much as they want. The fact that PPS is in the strength that it is, and people are promoted from constable to captains overnight, there are severe irregularities there, but because it's attached to the presidency, they carry on with impunity. Perfect example, again, Paul Mashatile's bodyguards, they're back at work, and they found, when they did the internal investigation, they said that the video footage wasn't admissible. So court says it's admissible, but you say it's not admissible. How is that possible? So, yeah, I would focus on the due diligence side first, because my question is, it's two-pronged. One, did these people slip through the cracks because your system isn't functioning, and then why isn't it functioning? Or did they slip through the cracks because you wanted them to?
Love the show? Rep the movement. Tap join right here to become an SMWX member now. Support bold African media. Join the fam.
I think those are very fair questions. We're going to wrap up now. But my last question, twofold. One, do you think we've ever had an effective police minister in South Africa? Because in my short lifetime, I think the answer is no, or at least democratic South Africa. And I say this because when I look at what the government communicates about policing and what South Africans feel about policing on the ground. I mean, you speak about the Cape Flats, and we look at specifically how I think aspects of crime dominate certain areas. So we look at how gang violence is very dominant on the Cape Flats. We look at how criminal syndicates, specifically like when we look at cash and transit heists, how that has seen a large uptick in the last 5 years, specifically in Gauteng. I think that when we look at how there has been criminal infiltration into government aspects, we look at people like Brown Mokgotsi. No one can tell me what business he has. That is the one thing I'm running out of the Ad Hoc Committee is people are referring to him as a businessman. It's like no one can tell us what business he has.
But controversial business.
Controversial businessman, but yet he has access to sensitive state information that members of parliament do not have access to. And so it really just begs the question for me, because listening to the testimony in the Ad Hoc Committee, the thing that was the most shocking to me, I mean, we heard from the deputy minister last week, who had essentially said, I, as the deputy minister, knew nothing about what was going on in this ministry. And I find that shocking. You're the deputy minister. If anything needed to happen to the minister, logic would dictate that the deputy minister could fulfill that role. So I just don't think that we've seen effective policing happening in South Africa. You've been a very vocal critic about that. What do you think needs to change?
So two things. I keep on saying two things, but I like to divide it up like that. It's first of all, there's no way that the deputy ministers didn't know about something. If we knew as much as we did, and we kept on speaking about, I'm not just speaking about the things that are happening now, but just over the past year, and they're like, no, but there aren't factions, there aren't real infights and so on. The infights in the South African Police Service have been coming for 25 years. It's probably just hit a certain climax now. Look, I don't think, regardless of the minister that we have, if we don't literally start with lifestyle audits and a skills audit of the top 100 in the police, we can change ministers all we like, unless that new minister does exactly that. We can do what we like. Nothing on the ground will change. We literally need to clean up the top. Crime intelligence, close them and start from scratch. They are probably the single biggest reason for all of this conflict. Remember, at the center of this is probably between a 400 and a 600 million rand budget slush fund that is lying there. What an awesome fund to use if you wanted to run an election. Now, bear with my conspiracy theory a little bit, and this is just that. Imagine if it were true that Minister Mchunu had the intentions that he did to become the president, and you suddenly remove your political killing task team, you remove Mkhwanazi, you remove Masemola, you gain control of the police, you appoint who you want in crime intelligence, who would then have control of that fund? Now, that's just a conspiracy theory.
It's not a bad conspiracy theory. He hid all Cyril's money for CR17.
The point is that all of these things have become options, and the reason why they're options is because we don't know if we can trust all of our senior police members. I don't. I certainly don't. And it's just because of all the noise around them. So I think that's the first thing. We can speak about technical policing on ground level all day, different solutions. We can speak about the Cape Flats, etc. That's a whole different debate. We need to make sure that there is integrity in the top structure. If that's not there, we're gonna fight a losing battle.
Thank you. I think this was a very insightful conversation. We'll have to have you back when Ad Hoc finally wraps up, hopefully before the end of the year. I don't think that's going to be very likely. Thank you, Ian and Cameron, for coming to you today. That is all we have for today. If you have any questions for Ian Cameron, put it below in the comments and we'll be sure to ask him the next time he's back on SMWX.